Hi everyone. First of all, I just want to say congratulations. This is the final lesson in this series. Thanks for sticking around this long. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how we blend together these looks layers, and then just adding a few more final adjustments to our image. So to start out, I always like to start out with our base Photoshop file that we saved out before, and then drop these looks filters on top of it. So first I have this romance filter. And I just like to play around with the different blending modes and opacity to kind of see how they look once they're layered up. So this one is just set to normal with the opacity turned down. Then I have this diffusion layer. And this one is just being masked out around the edges. I just want to kind of soften things up around the edges. You can see the effect that it's having over here. Then I have this dream look layer. And this is being masked out kind of in the center of the image, kind of where there's this coloration in the sky. And that's adding a little bit of diffusion there and a little bit more color. And then I have this sultry Tron layer. This is adding a little bit of contrast down here along the bottom. You can see how this is just has a soft gradient. And it seemed like it was a little bit oversaturated up in the top right corner. So I just added this hue saturation adjustment just to kind of tone that down a little bit, make it a little bit more natural. So once I'm happy with the way these looks are looking, I like to group this and then just make a copy and then flatten it. And I'll take this group and duplicate this layer and duplicate to a new document. Say OK. And then go to Image, Adjustments, and HDR Toning. If this comes up, just say OK. And there's two particular presets that I like to use in here. One is this Scott 5. If we click on that and say OK, this creates this really extreme kind of HDR image look that has some cool effects. So I like to take this and duplicate it back to our scene. Say OK. And I'm going to step back in the history and then go to HDR toning again. And this time I'm going to use this photorealistic high contrast and say OK. And I'm going to duplicate this over as well. Okay, and then I'm just going to rename these so I know what they are. And then I don't want to use these too strongly, so I'm just going to turn the opacity way down. Just use them very subtly. Same thing with this. We'll just set them really low. But I think they have a nice effect, just bringing out some of the little details in there. And then once I'm happy with that, I've also added in this bokeh layer. This is just a bit of bokeh that I've painted in. And again, I'm just going to turn the opacity down really low on this just so you can barely see it. Something like 20% is probably good. And then once I'm happy with all of this, I'm going to take these layers and copy them and then flatten them. And then on this one, I'm just going to add a little bit more sharpening to this. So go up to Filter, Sharpen, and I like to use the Smart Sharpen filter. So we'll click on that. And then let's just turn this up a little bit, maybe turn up the radius a little bit. So you can kind of see how it's affecting some of this. Maybe something like this will be good. Say OK. So just sharpening it up just a little bit. And then once we're happy with all of this, I'll take this layer again, and I'm going to duplicate this to a new layer, new document again. Say OK. And this time, I want to add a little bit of chromatic aberration to this image. You can do this in looks, but you can also do it in Photoshop, and I found it seems to look a little bit better in here. So if we go over to the channels, and then just select our red channel. And then if we just hit Control A and select everything visible and switch to our transform tool, and we're just going to scale this up a little bit, holding down Alt so it scales in both directions. And I just want to set this really small, so something like 100.1, and then just say OK. Now if we were to take a look at this and kind of see what this is doing here. Basically it's just adding a little bit of shifting the cyan up and then creating this kind of magenta color below. And the effect is stronger towards the edges of the image. So it's very subtle, but I think it's just a nice little final touch. And then we'll take this, let's rename this CA for chromatic aberration, and we'll duplicate this back into our scene. And that's basically the end of it. Now you can just flatten your image and save it out in whatever format it needs to be, deliver it to your client, and hope that they like it. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial, and I hope you learned a few new things. And if you have any questions, hopefully I can answer some of them on the forums or in the comment section somewhere. So thanks for watching.